Hello and welcome back to MTT Finance. My name is Michael, your host here on the channel. And in today's video, I'm going to be going over what I'm calling the top 10 mistakes that I made in my late teens and early 20s. Some of the mistakes that I'm going to mention today in the video have to do with financial things. However, there is a few of them, especially towards the end, that have to do with just everyday life on things that when I was in my late teens and early 20s either made mistakes about or was totally ignorant of, and it ended up costing me in the long run. Also, be sure to stick around until the very end, as mistake number 10 is something that I think a lot of people, especially in that age group from late teens to early 20s and beyond, are making right now. So fasten your seatbelts and get ready for the ride, because I'm going to be going over the top 10 mistakes that I made in my early 20s. And be sure to give that like button a smash. Otherwise, little Ray here is going to be losing more than just another hand. Starting off with the financial mistake number 1 that I made in my early 20s, and that is understanding that saving money is good. That's a great thing. We should all try to save money. But investing is also going to be super helpful for you in the long run. And that can be a great mindset to have, don't spend your money, save it instead. However, there is a downside to that attitude, as when you only save your money, when you don't invest your money can actually begin to lose value because of what's called inflation. So because of inflation, the money that you have in your savings account, in your bank, can actually have less buying power in the future. You need to have some way to protect your wealth from losing its value, and the way to do that is to invest your money. And so mistake number 1 that I made in my early 20s was that I took everything and put it straight into my savings account. I never even thought about investing it because, that could be risky, and sure, investing is risky, but that's why you educate yourself so that your risk is very minimal and that you will have a high reward. The second mistake that I made in my early 20s regarding finances and money is I would buy things just because they were on sale. And I usually would go through like little spurts where if you take a look behind me, you'll see all these books. Well, I got a lot of these books because they were on sale. So I would see like Amazon or Barnes & Noble was having a book sale, and I would be like, oh, look at all these classic books from Barnes & Noble. Well, maybe someday I'll read. Right up there, I got The Odyssey and Dracula. And I bought them just because they were on sale and they look cool. The problem with buying things just because they're on sale is that you end up spending more money than you actually would have if you had just gone out and bought the things you need. So the third financial mistake that I made was that when I was in college, I never put anything, not a single penny, towards paying off my student loans. Why? I don't know. I just didn't. I didn't want to think about them. I wanted to just pretend like they weren't there, that going to school was totally free, which it wasn't. And so I didn't even take a look and see the final amount until after I had graduated. In fact, it was actually past after I graduated. It was when the money and the loans actually became due for their first payment. However, even though some of the loans didn't start incurring their interest until after I was done with school, it still would have been very helpful for me to have put even just, a few dollars here and there, let's say, $25 a month or something like that towards my student loans. That way it would have kept them more at bay and stopped the principal from growing. And when your principal grows, your interest is going to exponentially grow as well. And that's a very bad thing when it comes to paying off debt. You want a low principal and a low interest rate so that the interest that you have to pay doesn't keep going up. The fourth financial mistake I made, especially when it comes to student loans, is that I waited 2 years to refinance my loans. When I first started paying on my student loans, my private loans were about $900 a month, and my government loans were also about $900 a month minimum payments. So what did I do? I basically threw an extra $100 on both of them, so I was paying around $2,000 a month total for my student loans. The reason why the minimum payments were so high, though, was because the interest rates were high on both sets of loans, and I didn't seek to reduce them because I didn't know I could. And so after about 2 years, I actually just got interested and decided to call up Sally Mae, my private loan, and asked them, hey, is there any way I can have my interest rates lower? Just kind of out of curiosity. And they were like, absolutely. And when I lowered my interest rates on my student loans, it also greatly reduced my minimum payments due each month. So I think it went from paying around $900 a month on my Sallie Mae to around $300 a month, which is awesome. And so if I only from day one of paying off my student loans, called them up, had the interest rates reduced, had the minimum payments reduced, I would actually probably have shaved off, I would say a few years of paying back my student loans. The fifth financial mistake I made, especially when it comes to paying off student loans, is that I left more money in my savings account than I needed instead of using that money to pay off my debt quicker. My opinion now is that my savings account should really only be that emergency fund, that sum of cash that's needed to pay 3 to 6 months of your living expenses, maybe a couple extra things like if your car were to break down, having expenses for that, and then the rest should be going towards investing or paying off debt. And I did not do that in my early 20s. I basically like to just put my $2,000 towards my student loans a month and then take the rest and put it right in my savings account and leave it there. Don't touch it. And I think that just made me feel safe. However, I could have, once again, shaved off time from paying off my student loans by taking the extra amount of money in my savings account. I think at one point I had like $6,000 that above and beyond my emergency fund in my savings account that I could have put towards my student loans. So don't do that. Use that extra money you have in your savings account, if you have some, to pay off your debt. You will thank yourself in the long run. The sixth financial mistake I made in my 20s was that I would occasionally spend money on trends or on a phase I was going through. So basically what this looks like, I can only really think of two different ones, and that is right around the time I graduated high school and I just started college, I, for whatever reason, got into archery and hunting. And so I went out and bought archery equipment, a bow, arrows, other things that you need, which is not a cheap expense. And I really haven't used them at all. I kind of just bought it because I was in this phase, and then I came out of the phase and haven't really used it since. So don't do stuff like that. Sometimes it's best just to be patient. Recognize if you are going through a little bit of a phase or a trend, and not just spending your money on things that you will later regret and not use. The next mistake that I made in my early 20s, and the next four actually have nothing directly to do with money, but instead have more to do with my mindset and how I thought about life in general. And so the sixth mistake that I made in my early 20s was that I failed to educate myself on being financially literate. I failed to start to set up spending habits that would be healthy, and failed to basically plan for my future financially. The seventh mistake that I made in my early 20s was the mindset of thinking that a high-paying job will fix all my problems and will be all I need financially. And once I have that, I'll be financially set. Now, there's nothing wrong with going to school, as I did, going to college and getting a master's degree and using that master's degree to go out and get yourself a nice high-paying job. The problem is that if that's your only focus for cash flow, you will find that a lot of times that may not be enough. And when it's not enough, that's where stress and anxiety can creep in, because that job that you work so hard to get may fall short when it comes to actually paying all your bills, especially if you have student loans. And so if you have the mindset that just getting a grip on that high-paying job is going to solve your problems, that could lead to a little bit of a heartache and heartbreak when you learn that that high-paying job won't actually fix all your problems. And you should probably be researching other ways to generate other sources of income, which I didn't do in my early 20s, and now I look back and wish that I did. The ninth big mistake that I made in my early 20s, I think I got out of order with the counting, but this one actually is the ninth one. But the ninth mistake that I made in my early 20s when it comes to just personal development, and that is I had all these big ideas of ways that, some of them with ways that I could make more money or generate cash flow or help my family. And because they seemed too far-fetched to me, they seemed too big for my brain to fully grasp, I basically just left them in the back of my mind and never pursued them. Funny story, when I was in college, I actually stayed with my grandparents at their house, and occasionally we'd get around the dinner table when we were eating, and we would kind of just discuss random money-making ideas. Some of them were actually quite humorous, and I won't go into all of them now. The thing is that a lot of the ideas we actually came up with were legitimate, and if we had to put them to practice, put in the hard work and then put them to practice, there's no reason why they couldn't have maybe generated at least $100 a month. Now, that may seem small when you compare it to other businesses, but that's still $100 that we didn't have before, and that would have I could have put it towards student loans or investing, whatever. And so I think if I were to go back and talk to my past self when I was in my early 20s or even my late teens, it would be to put at least one of those crazy ideas to work and see what happens. If you fail, and you have the rest of your life to keep going. And lastly, mistake number 10 that I made in my early 20s, and as I said in the beginning of the video, I think a lot of people today are making, and that is spending absolutely way too much time on social media, especially when I was in college, because a lot of my time was being spent studying and homework and lectures and having to do all that, professional training, training for the work field. Because of all of that, I like to then use my downtime to do something that was completely unproductive, and that felt good to do. Because you go from working hard at campus, and then when you drive home, which I didn't live on campus, I just wanted to unwind and do something completely unproductive and just relax. The problem is that there was absolutely no balance. So there's nothing wrong with, using social media as a way to just relax and unwind, go and watch a funny video on YouTube or something like that. But there was no balance. I would just spend hours upon hours on YouTube. YouTube was my favorite one, and I would just watch funny videos. But I know a ton of people spend all day doing that as well. And so I think back of I would say, countless amount of hours that are lost, gone forever, scrolling on social media. And I could have been, I know I sound like a dead horse here, or dead horse. I know I'm beating a dead horse here when I say this, but I could have been using that time to educate myself on how to budget better. Or I could have been using that time to give back to someone else, give back to the community instead of just sitting there scrolling away and only feeding myself entertainment. I don't mention all of these mistakes simply to look back and have this kind of defeatist attitude when I think back on my early 20s of, man, I wish I could go back in a time machine and do things differently. I think the best thing to do is just to learn from your mistakes, learn from your ignorance, and then seek to improve yourself so that moving forward, you don't make the same mistakes that you made in the past. But anyway, I think that's going to wrap up this video of my top 10 mistakes I made in my early 20s. If you found any of these relatable, let me know down in the comments. Maybe you found yourself committing one or two of these mistakes yourself or more. I tried to just pick the ones that I thought would be most well applicable. I didn't make any crazy mistakes. I didn't go out and buy a super expensive car that kept me in debt. My life has been pretty even keel, I would say, at least through my 20s. So I didn't make a lot of crazy mistakes, but I think a lot of the mistakes I mentioned in this video are things that would apply to a lot of people. So if you found this video helpful, if you found this video even revealing to yourself of things that you've done, leave a comment down below, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care and stay safe.